Okay, sit down. Because what we are about to walk through tonight is one of the most stunning, most infuriating, most jaw-dropping displays of political theater this country has seen in years. And I need you to pay very close attention, because the details here matter. Every single one of them. Pam Bondi, the Attorney General of the United States, the top law enforcement officer in this country, the woman who swore an oath to uphold the truth, to protect the American people, and to hold the powerful accountable. That woman just sat in front of Congress. And what happened in that hearing room was something that should make every single American, Democrat, Republican, Independent, doesn't matter, absolutely furious. Let's be very clear about what this hearing was actually about. The Epstein files, the Jeffrey Epstein case, the names, the clients, the network, the cover-up. The question that millions of Americans have been demanding an answer to for years: who protected Jeffrey Epstein, and why is nobody in power being held accountable? That is what Congress was trying to get to the bottom of. And Pam Bondi, the Attorney General of the United States, was supposed to come in there and give answers. She did not give answers. She gave a performance. And I want you to understand the difference. Because an answer looks like, here are the documents, here are the facts, here is what the Department of Justice found, here is what we are doing about it, here are the names. That is an answer. That is accountability. That is what the American people deserve. What Pam Bondi gave Congress was deflection wrapped in legal language, dressed up in confidence, and delivered with the kind of practiced calm that you only develop when you have spent years learning how to say absolutely nothing while sounding like you are saying everything. Members of Congress were not buying it. And that is where this hearing went from uncomfortable to explosive. Because when a sitting attorney general cannot answer basic, direct questions about one of the most significant federal criminal cases in modern American history, when she sits there in front of elected representatives and the American public and dodges and pivots and runs out the clock, that is not incompetence. That is a choice. That is a deliberate choice to protect someone. And the only question is who. Let's talk about what Pam Bondi actually did in this hearing, because it is important that we do not let the noise of the moment distract from the substance of what happened. Bondi was asked directly about the Epstein client list, about the names that the American people have been told for years are coming, about the individuals who allegedly paid for access to Jeffrey Epstein's trafficking network. People with power, people with money, people with connections to politicians on both sides of the aisle, people who may still be walking free today. And Pam Bondi's response was to tell Congress that releasing those names could compromise ongoing investigations. Ongoing investigations. Let me say that again. Ongoing investigations years after Epstein died in federal custody under circumstances that the FBI itself has never fully explained to the public. Years after his associate Ghislaine Maxwell was convicted and sentenced. Years after victims have come forward again and again and again. And the Attorney General of the United States is telling Congress that we cannot release the names because of ongoing investigations. How long does an investigation have to be ongoing before the American public is allowed to know what their government knows? How many years? How many decades? How many more victims have to come forward before someone in power looks at this case and says enough? The public deserves the truth. Because here is what Pam Bondi is not saying. She is not saying there are no names. She is not saying the Department of Justice has found nothing. She is saying we have information and you cannot have it. That is what she is saying. And she is saying it with a straight face, in front of Congress, under oath. Members of Congress pushed back hard, and they were right to push back, because the people sitting across from Pam Bondi in that hearing room are representatives of the American people. Their job is to ask the hard questions. Their job is to demand accountability. And what they got from the Attorney General was a masterclass in how power protects itself. Let's talk about something else that came out of this hearing. Something that has not gotten nearly enough attention in the mainstream conversation. The DOJ under Pam Bondi's leadership has had more than enough time to act on the Epstein case. The Maxwell conviction happened. The documents have been unsealed, some of them. And yet, not a single high-profile individual connected to Epstein's client network has been charged. Not one. In a case involving the systematic trafficking and abuse of underage girls. In a case with more documented evidence than almost any other federal investigation in recent memory. In a case where victims have given testimony. Where financial records exist. Where flight logs exist. Where the island exists. Where the properties exist. Where the evidence exists. And the Department of Justice, under the watch of Pam Bondi, has produced 0 prosecutions of Epstein's clients. 0. Now you tell me, does that sound like justice to you? Does that sound like the Department of Justice is actually doing its job? Or does that sound like the Department of Justice is doing something else entirely? And this is the part where it gets truly uncomfortable. Because Pam Bondi has her own history with Jeffrey Epstein. Before she was Attorney General, before she was a national political figure, Pam Bondi was the Attorney General of Florida. And when she was the Attorney General of Florida, her office had an opportunity, an actual, documented, real opportunity to pursue charges against Jeffrey Epstein before the sweetheart federal deal that let him walk away with almost nothing. Her office, her jurisdiction, her decision. She did not pursue it. Now she is the Attorney General of the United States, sitting in front of Congress, telling the American people that she is committed to justice in the Epstein case. And she expects us to believe that. She sat there under oath in front of the country, and she expects the American people to simply trust her. Here is what trust requires. Trust requires transparency. Trust requires accountability. Trust requires showing your work. Trust requires saying, here are the documents, here is the timeline, here is what we found, here is why we made the decisions we made, here is what we are going to do differently. Trust is earned through action, not through a polished hearing room performance. And what Pam Bondi gave Congress in that hearing room was not trust building. It was trust destroying. Because every non-answer, every deflection, every reference to ongoing investigations, every moment where a direct question was met with a practiced pivot, every single one of those moments tells the American people the same thing. We are not going to tell you the truth. We are not ready to tell you the truth. And we may never be ready to tell you the truth. The victims of Jeffrey Epstein's trafficking network are watching this. They're watching the Attorney General of the United States sit in front of Congress and protect a process that has failed them for decades. They're watching powerful people continue to avoid accountability while they are expected to simply wait. Simply be patient. Simply trust the system that failed them. The system that cut Jeffrey Epstein a sweetheart deal. The system that put him in a federal prison where he died under circumstances that still have not been fully and honestly explained to the American public. The system that has had years to bring his clients to justice and has not done it. And now Pam Bondi wants a seat at the table of that system and wants the American people to believe she is going to fix it. I am sorry, but the evidence does not support that conclusion. The record does not support that conclusion. What happened in that hearing room does not support that conclusion. What that hearing showed us is exactly what many Americans have feared for a long time. That the Epstein case is not being pursued as a criminal justice matter. It is being managed as a political one. It is being controlled. It is being rationed. Information is being released slowly enough to give the appearance of transparency, while the most important truths remain buried deep inside a Department of Justice that answers to people who have every reason to keep them buried. And Pam Bondi sat in that chair and played her part in that management. Expertly. Professionally, with total confidence. But here is what she could not manage. The look on the faces of the members of Congress sitting across from her. The frustration, the disbelief, the barely controlled anger of elected representatives who know they are being stonewalled and cannot do anything about it in that room on that day. That was real. That was not theater. That was accountability trying to break through a wall of power and not quite making it. The American people deserve better than this. The victims deserve better than this. The truth deserves better than this. Pam Bondi had a chance in that hearing room to be the attorney general that finally brought real accountability to the Epstein case. She chose not to be that person. She chose to be the gatekeeper instead of the truth teller. And that choice, that deliberate, calculated, fully conscious choice, will not be forgotten.